And we're live. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Good Thing, hosted by myself, Stefan, and my co-founder, Jens. Jens, how you doing today?
Like with the words of Sergey, it's okay.
For those of you that don't know, Sergey is our first engineer ever at WonderGraph, and he was my founding engineer. And he doesn't speak much. He delivers like crazy, but he just says, "It's okay. If something's not bad, it's okay. If something's great, it's okay. If something's bad, it's okay."
He has this Eastern European style. It's okay.
Funny thing about Eastern Europeans, me being from Serbia, like I don't know, we're known for not showing too much emotion, but which is weird because I'm American and we like emotion. But yeah, you should meet my dad one day, Jens. You would laugh. We're completely different guys. Cool. But yeah, Jens, thanks for, I guess, joining me. I mean, you have to join me. This is our podcast.
You forced me to. Hey, Jens, we need to do marketing. Come on a podcast with me.
Yeah, it's true, but the people like it, which was fun. But I mean, we got some cool topics today. So guys, today we're gonna be talking about founder mode. Is it scalable versus a founding team? REST versus GraphQL is outdated. We're also gonna talk about some drama that we saw on Twitter, but also that we're facing with copycat competitors and benchmarking and just calling out developer tooling in a like respectable way, which I think is BS because developers like to hide behind calling each other out on technology. It's interesting, but I think that's going to be good content today. And then the last one is just the rise in content. So yesterday, a VC invested into two content creators, $60 million, and one of their statements in the announcement piece was that founder-led content and just content from companies where it's not like about the company and it's just about the founders is on the rise. And we've seen it. So many other founders are posting more content like this. And it's good that we're a little bit ahead of the curve, Jens. But yeah, I'm excited to chat today.
Yeah, I mean, WonderGraph. It's a. You could say dev tool. Like we don't we have a special relationship with the word dev tool, but we're we have a product that attracts developers, and traditional marketing is that you need to go different ways, and you cannot. I don't know. I think building the brand these days, it's very important to stay authentic and to not actively push the product, but rather say, I like a while ago I said, um, the vendor, like us, so we should be advocating the category, not the solution, the category. So we speak about federation and how it's great, and then we let our customers with their stories speak about how they use Cosmo. So that's kind of, I think that's the modern trustful marketing. So let people decide with their credit card and talk about what they have decided, and let us talk about how the category works, and what you can do with it, and then people can decide if they like that or not. And yeah, I think a podcast like what we're doing, I think that's a good way.
I would agree. And the other day, I watched this video which was about creating content. And the thing about creating content is that anybody can create content. It doesn't matter what age you are. And I think everybody should create content because everyone has unique life experiences and everybody is experienced something that maybe other people haven't. And this analogy that I saw was really helpful, which is that imagine you're in a line of people. When you create content, you're sharing your experiences for all the people behind you that are not where they're not where you are. And so you're helping them get to where you are because they would love to be where you are. And then you obviously want to get ahead of the line and there's 50 people ahead of you and they're creating content. And so you want to get to that point. And so if we all created content and just passed it back, it's just a unique learning experience. And I think this founder-led content that we're doing is super helpful because I'll be honest, again, 3 years ago, I don't think you would have done a podcast. You were not very, you were more like traditional developer. You were great with customers, but I don't think you would have done a podcast 3 years ago.
At least not on my own. I think even today I wouldn't do it on my own, because I think there's just like different types of characters. I'm the type of character. If you start the conversation, I will happily join the conversation. If there's no conversation and I'm there, then there's still no conversation. Just I don't know. Some characters are not starting conversation. Like if I go to a party and you don't start the conversation with me, I will
We won't
drink
talk.
one beer after another until I'm drunk, and I don't talk to anybody. Just I don't know. I don't do it. But if you come to me and say, "Hey, Jens, let's talk about Federation," then we can talk all night. But yeah, it's like people are people are different.
Yeah, and I'm the opposite way. Like you could put me anywhere, and at the end of the night, there'll be people surrounding me, and I'm keeping the conversation alive. My wife is always joking about that. She's like, wherever I bring you to like an influencer event with nobody in technology, and like you're talking to them about stuff. And I was like, well, you can always relate to people about random stuff. Like for example, Jens always laughs whenever we meet a company in Europe or I don't know, just somewhere based out of like maybe London. I'll be like, oh, do you guys support football? 99% of them say no because they're developers. But eventually we do get one or two, and then we talk about football, and it's honestly it's a good bonding moment. That's why I like being able to do this podcast and create content. Honestly, it's fun too because we brought Dustin on the podcast 2 episodes ago, and you could see him getting out of his shell. Like Dustin's typically like an architect, CTO, but when you get him to talk about stuff like this, you can see how much more fun it is to get to know the people behind the product. And our customers have said the same thing. They're like, I really enjoy your episodes of the podcast, which one makes us keep doing it because customers are saying that they like it, but also two, it's cool to see the people like again behind the product. And I think that's what's really important about content from founders is that behind Wondergraph Cosmo there's actually people with personal lives, there's people that are doing this with the passion, and you don't traditionally see that from big companies, right?
Yeah, I like most people don't care about you. Everybody is busy. Nobody cares what you're doing. Nobody cares that WonderGraph has a new feature. But people are super interested in the story, in the struggle, in the how did they get there? How did they help someone go to Super Bowl with their APIs? And yeah, it's stories. And just one thing I wanted to pick up before I forget about it. You mentioned just start with content. And here's the thing: you like one of your friends, David K. Piano. He
Mhm.
said this a while ago. Um, Everybody can record a video. Just just record it, even if it's
Mhm.
bad. Just record it, put it on YouTube, and then record a second one and make a third one. And you will hate the first ones, and eventually they will get better. And this is, for example, like I'm not so like the video guy, but with you, Stefan, it's okay. But I love to write blog posts, and when I started, like a couple of years ago, it was hard for me to write, and I really didn't like my first blog post. But if you write more than 100 blog posts,
You're
then
good.
you can more or less write a blog post in your head, and the typing in the end is really just putting it in paper. The rest is already done because you have created like a structure in your head how to write blog posts. And so yeah, it's with so many skills. If you want to get good at something, start with it. You will suck, and then do it again, and you will suck again, and do it a couple more times, and you will suck less, and eventually it will be good.
That's crazy that you bring that up. So like every once in a while, like people see like the success of like Wondergraph, like my friends from college, and they're like, wow, like let's hop on a call. Like I want to know what you're doing. Like what are you doing differently? And I always tell them the same thing is that in the beginning of the days of Wondergraph, like when we were doing this on the side, when you were working your full-time job, I was working my full-time job. Jens told me it's like taking spaghetti and throwing it against the wall because you can see when it sticks that it's ready, that it's good to eat, it's al dente. But if the spaghetti falls, it's not ready. And people over overcomplicate things. If you want to get good at programming, start typing. If you want to get good at soccer, start kicking the ball around. If you want to get good at content, just start making videos. And it's exactly what you said is that if you want to start building a startup, the first thing you have to do is just start. Start something. Try everything that you can, and eventually you get good at it. And it's the same thing with sales. Do you remember our first sales call? And then now our any
No, I
sales call
don't.
that we do? I actually don't even remember it actually too, but point is on a sales call, I'm already seeing stuff that like I know what to do. Like I'm already seeing the patterns. I'm already knowing exactly what to do. And because it comes from actually taking the calls. And for me, I think people overcomplicate it because stop thinking and just do. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people struggle with is they like are thinking theory, like, oh, how big is the market? How big is this? How big is that? And it's like, dude, you'll never know if you don't start. You might create a whole new market if you would just start the freaking product.
Yeah. You know what's so funny? In the beginning, when we started with sales, I was always afraid of getting rejected. Today, I want to be rejected. Like I actively pursue being rejected because the very last thing you want to end up is in a situation where you have a potential customer who will never be a customer. Like,
Yeah.
in the past, I really feared asking the credit. Like, you talk to a big enterprise and you knew you're too small. Like, we're two people. Like, they will never buy from us. We knew it. But we wouldn't ask because we were afraid of losing that opportunity. So we didn't ask. And today, we're like, hey, you like, I don't know, whatever. We're just very upfront. Like, hey, we're this and that. Is that a problem for you? Like, can your company deal with that situation? And they say yes, they say no. If they say no, you have time for all the other leads. So yeah, why waste your time with an opportunity that's do you remember that one company where one developer was he kept pushing us towards
Yeah.
building more features so that eventually he could convince management, and we just couldn't tell him, dude, either we speak to the manager now, or we have to assume that we're not bringing any value to your company and you're not ready to pay for what we're doing because it doesn't have the value that you're willing to put the credit card.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to learn this, right?
That was a rough time because I think you said it perfectly. Like, just get to the know. This is even also good in like just life. Like, you see a cute girl, go ask her out. The worst thing she can say is no, or maybe she says yes. Just try to get to the know. And you taught me this actually. In a sales negotiation, the no is the start of the negotiation. The worst thing you
Why
want
no?
is,
Explain to
yeah,
me. What's the
e-
problem?
exactly. You want to
We,
get
we,
to the
we cannot
no.
use SaaS. Why? Explain to me. What's the problem? Oh, we security. Yeah, we have SOC too. And then
It
yeah,
opens it up. That's where the negotiations
yes.
start. The worst thing you want is what we had with this customer, which was a maybe. Oh, we like your product, but if you add this, maybe I'll introduce you to my manager. And so for 6 months, we're adding features. We're building for this giant enterprise. They're a Fortune something company. They're publicly traded. And it was one guy. And eventually it got to the point where we built everything. And he's like, oh, can you add it on the edge? And we were like, okay, you know what? Like we how long did it take? I think we worked with him for a whole year building stuff, and we never got a single dollar from this company.
Stefan, what's the bigger competitor than your competitor? Like, how do you lose most deals? And it's not the competition. What is it?
How do we lose most deals? I mean,
I put you on the spot, right?
yeah, well, it depends. Like, how do we lose it? Sometimes it is to
You
the
you you
competitor.
know it. You just forgot. It's indecision.
Oh yeah, 100%. Especially if it takes too
They
long.
they come to you. Somehow the sales process is not working like you want, and then they are like, we're not moving forward with the project. That's
Yeah.
yeah, you fucked it up. You made a mistake, and this typically happens when you did not fully understand what the customer is trying to do. Because and this is like, I would say, I don't know, I'm not a salesperson, but we have a little bit of intuition.
Not bad.
Customer comes to you, says we want federation, and we say we can do federation, and then we show how awesome we are, and then after a while they say, it's not the right thing. And the problem is, customer says we want federation, and then stop.
Yeah.
Take a few steps back. What are you trying to do? Like, what problem is this solving? Who's driving this initiative? Where's the money coming from? Who's making the decisions? Like, why are you here? Why do you join this meeting? Why do you talk to us? What is important to you? Is that really like, is it a hair on fire, or is it someone is interested in trying out cool tech? Because you don't want to sell to people who try out cool tech. You want to solve the most important problem in that company.
Yeah. I would agree to that. One thing though on that is indecision is the biggest like killer of deals, but you also have to walk a fine line. So like right now, I'm currently like negotiating with the vendor to purchase something for WonderGraph, and I got them down to the price that I want, but they said that price is only active until Friday. Like
You got them down. So are you buying or they buying?
I'm buying. I'm buying.
You're buying. Okay, you're
Yeah,
buying.
yeah. I don't want to mention the name because if we go with them, but basically they came in, they were like all this stuff, and they were like, "Oh, like I got the deal down to this price, but it's only valid till Friday." And like, I get you want to you want to squish the indecisiveness, but there's also a way to do it. I don't like that pressure that was put on me. Like, what would you do there? And then you could talk a little bit about our sales process and how we handle indecisiveness.
Yeah. Maybe it's a German or European thing, but if you hold a gun to my head, I will just run away.
It's the same
No,
thing. Like,
it
oh my
it
god.
it, it, it doesn't work, and I think the problem is this person fails to understand your motivation, and they fail to demonstrate the value, because you're like, no, the price needs to come down and I need time to decide. If someone needs a lot of time to decide, the value is not clear. Like, if you can if you can pay $1 and you get five, how long will you think about it?
I'm not thinking, I'm buying.
Simple, right? But if someone wants to from you, like, I don't know, 500K, and you're like, I need to think about it. Yeah, it's not clear how the 500K will turn into 5 million.
I think you just broke down enterprise sales in probably the most clear way I've ever seen. Like, that's the biggest problem is that vendors are not demonstrating the value. And what you can do is if you take away all the layers, you want to pitch your product that you give me $1 and I will bring you $5. And when the
Or
value is
20,
so
100.
clear, whatever it is, it's so easy to make a decision. And I think that's the biggest problem is indecisiveness comes because what you're doing is you're evaluating the value and it's just not there if you're still taking a long time to decide on it. Because for me, if I purchase this, I'm putting my name on the line. I'm bringing this into WonderGraph. Same thing when people purchase WonderGraph Cosmo, the champion, they're bringing this platform into their organization. Their name is on it. If things go bad, they say, hey, Jens was the one that brought in Cosmo. It's clearly not doing a good job. Or if it does go well, man, Jens, this is a fantastic product. Thank you so much for bringing it in. And so you also have to do the emotional aspect, but I really like how you broke that down. $1, I give you $1, or you give me $1, I give you $5. That's exactly the way you should pitch value with your product.
Yeah, sometimes it's not so easy to see. Like, if I adopt graphical federation and I pay $1 for it, will I get five? What will I get? Collaboration across teams. I will have better microservices. I have this and that. And this is a point where it can help if you have existing customers. So I think, like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, the cheat code to startup success is to have customers. That's and I just watched the documentary, and it was about billionaires, and the billionaire said, yeah, I inherited some money, but then I had to do all this hard work. Yeah, of course. Like, dude, of course you did hard work. And also, when you were young, your parents had all these connections and they gave you starting money and they helped you to get into circles where nobody else, like, the reality is, if you want to be successful, you need a network, and you need, like, ideally you have customers, and you can create, or you can derive customer stories, like what problems did you solve for customers, and then you go to the next prospect and tell them, like, hey, do you have this problem? Do you have this problem? They say yes, and then you can teach them how that company solved this problem. So now it's actually clear how you get $5 from one or more. And yeah, so it's a cheat code. And because this is the cheat code, you need customers. So how do you get your first customers? It's simple. Build any whatever. Build something. Like, your first startup idea is garbage. Like, even if you think it's smart, it's garbage, because what you need is distribution. So build whatever, get distribution, build some sort of distribution, 5 customers, talk to them, figure out the pattern. Like, oh, these 5 customers, they have the same pattern. I build a new tool, I solve it. And then I have 5 customers already, so they pay you, so it's easier to upsell them to something else. So you give them this new solution, and then you write a customer success story, or you do a podcast with them, and now you can go to other people and say, hey, we solved this problem for these 5 people. So yeah, in retrospect, startup, it's not so hard. Just yeah, I think, and this is something for technical founders, don't get hung up on your idea, because your idea is garbage. Like, even if you're super smart, like, but your first idea is just whatever, just build something, distribute something, get customers, because then you have a playbook of selling something. And yeah, so I don't know.
It's spot on. YC always said like their motto is build things that people want. And one of the manifest, one of the rules is just have a small group of customers. It's better to have 10 customers that absolutely love your product than 100 customers that are like, yeah, it's not bad. It's okay. And the reason that they say that is because what you just said, Jens, is that once you have a couple customers that love your product, you start to open up network effects. They'll start to talk to their friends about this product. Hey, man, have you tried out WonderGraph Cosmo? Like, you're using Federation. It's fantastic. Try it out. You know, it solves all these problems. And the second part is it's so easy to see patterns, is that you have this customer and you're like, oh, that's a use case. And then you talk to another company, you're like, oh, we actually solved that problem for this customer. Here, look at this case study that they did. And it makes the sale even easier. But then they're like, and then in decisiveness, and what you do is you take that customer and you bring them into a call and you just sit back and just watch them talk. And what they do is that they're selling your product in a non-salesy way because they're actually collaborating together. And that's also one of the benefits. And it's funny that you said billionaires, because they all say the same thing. Like, the first million is a bitch. It's the hardest thing to do. And it's the same thing in startups. It's the hardest to get to the 1 million ARR mark. It's really hard to get your first customers that love you. But after that, it just scales up so easily because you have these customers. Same thing with if you make $1 million. Once you get the first million, you invest a little bit, compound interest starts to take into effect. You make some more actions, you purchase some real estate. And then after that, from the 1 to the 5 million to the 10, it just exponentially grows. But getting to that first 1 million is really a bitch.
And maybe one little bit spicy take to add, opinions without a credit card are noise. So if you have a startup idea and you go to your friends, they like you and they will say it's cool. I could imagine buying it, whatever, but they are not buying it. And the same is with developers who show up on your open source repo and say, "Oh, it's great. I have an idea how you could make it better." And they are also not buying. They are not a customer. So I think if you want to build a great open source project, yeah, of course you can listen to like I love open source, like open source collaboration. It's great, love it. But if you want to build a business, you need to, it's a bit like giving a loan. You need to underwrite opinions with money. Opinion without money, just someone saying words. It's not so
I agree.
important.
I think though that's only in the context though of B2B. So like software and like selling to businesses. Because do you think that applies for, like, let's say Facebook? Like, Facebook didn't charge, and the first thing that everyone told them was no ads. Who was it in the social network? I think it was Edwin Stavros. He was like, we need to start charging for ads. And one of the other founders was like, no, get as many people as you can onto the platform. Once you do that, you can figure out how to make money. Same thing with Uber. Their biggest thing was growth, but I think that only applies to B2C. Would you agree?
Um, I would say I don't understand B2C. So ask people who do.
No, that's fair. I also have one theory though. Every successful B2B company eventually becomes B2C. What do you think about that?
Every successful B2B company eventually becomes B2C.
Yes.
Interesting. Is Salesforce B2B?
Salesforce, yes. But look at them
Is
now.
it B2C now?
Yes, now they do for restaurants, they do for personal stuff, they do like this agent force AI, and they went from like typical enterprises to restaurants and to smaller mom and pop stores, and they're spreading their network as farther as they can. Like, yes, technically it still is B2B, but they're going now
Why
further
why
into the
why is that?
masses.
Is the TAM too small, or what? What's the issue?
No, I think that's a byproduct of being too successful. Is eventually, like for example, if you're a B2B company, to get to the utmost success, you eventually become B2C. You start to spread out to everybody and you start to change things. That's just a theory that
In-
I have.
Interesting. So in the long term, we will federate your mobile phone, or what's your plan?
Yeah, I haven't thought about that yet. Some theories are like with developer tooling, you should build for the enterprise, but also the individual developer should be able to use your product. I don't think that's correct true because individual developers don't like to pay for stuff, which is totally fine. Our product is open source. But for us, what I think is, I mean, we currently have like the number one of the most popular apps on the App Store is using WonderGraph Cosmo to power it. It's the deal
Is
that
it?
we, yeah, I'll explain to you afterwards. I can't say their name yet because we don't have the NDA, but I'll tell you
Okay.
afterwards. Well, the number one app in the United States, actually. And it's, you're going to
So we're
laugh at the
actually
app.
doing B2C. At least we enable it.
Yeah, kind of. But it's an interesting topic. Like, for example, like Salesforce. Yes, like now they're going out to B2C. And I'm trying to think of a couple other examples of like really successful B2B companies.
So the way you argue is you make a big point and then you don't back it up.
No, it's just a theory. Like it's a hypothesis. That's my hypothesis. I haven't figured it
Okay.
out yet though. But
Yeah.
honestly, it's a good transition though. So let's go back to some of the topics that we have today. Like for example, is founder mode scalable versus a founding team? And for
What
those
is
of you
founder
like
mode?
founder mode, are you gonna ask me of my definition or what like Paul Graham said?
Uh, Both. I don't know.
So Paul Graham wrote this great essay, and it came from him sitting at a I guess like a what is it called? A fireside chat, and he was sitting down with the founder of Airbnb, and it's kind of like counterintuitive, but it's also startups. Like startups are very counterintuitive, and so my take on founder mode is doing what you're doing now with under 15 people, and you still do that when you have 1,500 people. And for me, founder mode isn't micromanagement, it's managing. It isn't over optimizing, it's optimizing. It's being involved in the nitty gritty, even when you still have 1,500 people. And I think that's a superpower at the beginning of startups is that, hey, for example, you can talk about today, Jens, like last week, you went on a customer call with one of our smallest customers and you came back with so many insights of things that we can improve for them that you definitely see some value for them as well as for us. And so, my definition as founder mode is doing what you're doing at the start of the startup and also doing the same thing that you're doing when your startup is absolutely massive. What about you?
To pick up your case, I'm just wondering if you have a 1,500 people organization, the CEO should probably somehow be involved in making sure that these 1,500 people do something meaningful. Should they be doing support? I mean, yes, of course, it would be super nice to be hands on and understand the product, but you also, at that stage, you will also have like product owners, and yeah, I'm not sure how much you want to interfere with these kind of people, but um, yeah, and then there's this other thing I wrote about it like a few days ago, the scalability of founder mode. And I mean, for a very long time, we were a small founding team, I would say, like 4 founders and a handful of founding engineers, and we kind of expanded founder mode to this whole team, and this is
Yeah.
until today, and even today, I would say that we're able to infect the whole team to be at least somewhat informed. Like, I'm not expecting people to work through the weekend or something like that. That's like, it's still a job. You have a life. I respect that. It's fine. But yeah, I mean, sometimes as a founder, you have to walk the walk, and there's no way around. But yeah, I'm not sure.
I think you're right though. So at 1500, like obviously you won't be able to do support. Like you won't be able to get in the nitty gritty, and you also want to hire smart people and get out of their way. But it's what you just said. Like if you walk the walk, organically people are going to see that and they're going to be like, crap, like look at what Jens is doing, and it just motivates them. And it's like the benefit of it is not to be a CEO, is to be a leader. And leaders don't tell people what to do, they show them what to do. And I think that's one key aspect that we have at WonderGraph, is that these founding engineers have in a way become founders themselves. You know, some of our engineers have shifted into parts of WonderGraph and they founded something. They founded the composition, they founded the engine, and they own that. And they're the startup owners of that. And I think the most successful startups or companies that are really, really good are actually an umbrella of startups where you just have founders all throughout them and they own it and they build mini startups. What do you think?
Yeah, kind of. I was just thinking, what makes us different? And I would say one thing that we really live is the way we do support. And like nobody pays for a support, or nobody wants to, like nobody says, yeah, give me the biggest support plan, because everybody just expects good support. But one thing I realized over the last couple of months is somehow we have created an industry in SaaS where support is typically absolute garbage, because
Yeah.
everybody tells us our support is top notch, like 10 out of 10, the best. Like they recommend us so much. And I don't know, it's just our culture. We as a company, we do our thing. And I think one of our core values is we want to do things right. If someone is not able to use our product the way they want, or if there's a problem or a use case we're not fully enabling, it bothers us. And it's like, yeah, we want to enable it. And obviously you have to prioritize. You cannot do everything at the same time. But it's, I don't know, it's, I would say that's a core value. We really care. And we, not sometimes you might think about competition and everything. Like, we don't think so much about competition. We're mainly concerned about like just today. Give you an example. Customer asks a question. They say, can we use Cosmo Router and add a custom middleware? I want to manipulate the response that we're sending to the client. So one way you can take this question is you can say, yeah, we have a custom module system. You can create a middleware, and then you can manipulate the response. This is one way how you can. Now you're out of support. So in my
Yeah.
past life, I was consultant. And if you're an external consultant, if you get a ticket, your goal is to write something into the ticket that's not offending, that's not negatively affecting any relationship, that's politically correct, but you really want to get it off your table.
Yeah.
You don't want to have open threads. And you get the question, you answer the question in some way, and you throw
That's
the
it.
ticket away. And not my, like, I don't care. So I didn't do that, but I asked him like a couple of questions, and then I realized, okay, I want to huddle with this person. So I huddled with this person. Luckily, they are open. We started a discussion. It's a healthcare company. Healthcare companies are super concerned about security,
And HIPAA.
and one aspect of that is personal information. And so what they were looking at is, when there is a problem with a doctor or a patient, and they report this problem, and the developer wants to replicate this, they want to mask data, because the developer shouldn't see, like, date of birth or something of a patient. Like as a healthcare startup, you cannot do it. And his thought was that WonderGraph would provide him a custom module, or a module system, so that he can build his customization to handle PII and to mask the data. And my thought is, or the way I think is, how can WonderGraph build a native or offer a native solution to handle PII? Because I think it is our responsibility as someone who provides a router,
Yes.
that the router understands that certain fields in your graphical schema are PII. And if the user is a developer and they have a certain JWT with certain claims and scopes, that under some conditions, because it's the real user, they can see the unmasked data. But if it's developer, they shouldn't see the data. You should mask it. So, and I think like PII, it's a problem that's everywhere. The router should come with a native solution. So we're now collaborating on how can we build a native solution instead of just saying, yes, build the middleware. And that's simply, I think, I don't know. It's so simple to move your startup forward. Just look at what people are trying to do.
Yeah, talk to users. One thing that you mentioned though was like, we don't really focus on competitors. We focus on the customers. And a cool antidote is from back in the day, there was a board meeting at Amazon when Jeff Bezos was CEO. And Amazon was profitable the first year. And then in years 3 or 4, they really took off in the early 2000s. Like they were crushing it. And so they were having I think that they even went public. So let's say they were a publicly traded company. And they were so far ahead in the e-commerce space in books that Barnes and Nobles, which is one of the biggest retailers for books in the United States, they started launching a online website to sell books, basically what Amazon is doing to compete with them. And a lot of the employees at Amazon got worried. They're like, oh my God, Barnes and Nobles has so much distribution. Like we're a startup. How are we going to compete against Barnes and Nobles? And one of the things that happened was Jeff Bezos wrote a memo to the entire company. And he says, the way we win against Barnes and Nobles is by focusing on the customer. We don't give any attention to Barnes and Nobles and we just focus on the customer. And he kept doing that throughout the years at Amazon, that if you focus on the customers, if you have the conversations with them, if you don't try to solve the problem, but instead learn exactly what the problem is that this is how you scale your startup. And that's literally the definition of founder mode. He kept it from the beginning all the way up until the end. Now it's a little bit tougher, but they still have that mantra of listen to the customer. And so this is a great point to talk a little bit about competitors. So Jens, we have a copycat competitor. Literally, if you guys have seen Borat, where it's like, we implement a router, they implement a router. We implement this, they implement that. We have customers, they don't have customers. No, I'm kidding. But jokes aside, we have a competitor and they do false marketing. And me and Jens are having a debate about this. And I want, maybe if the audience wants to chime in, but my take on this is if a competitor is doing false marketing and saying false information about your startup, you should correct it. You should call them out. And then, Jens, you have your opinion on this. You can give it if you want, but yours is don't even give them any attention. But what do you think about that? Like, and also it's a good transition. There was some drama on Twitter this week where a really big, what was it, Series B startup, he started causing drama about a competitor that was doing false marketing. And for me, I don't think that there's a way to win. What do you think?
So many topics to unpack. Where do we start?
Whichever one you want. We can start with founder mode, or you can start back with the competitors.
Okay, competitors. So one thing, like, I don't know, it's like, it's just my playbook. When I have a much bigger competitor, it's okay to say their name. It's okay to sometimes compare with them, but I also try to be not too impolite. Like, of course, there can be some banter, but no enterprise ever will like WonderGraph when the founders or the people of WonderGraph shit on Apollo. Like, I don't know.
You can't,
It
yeah.
shows it shows something about you. Like, you can compare, and maybe, yeah, but it's a gray zone. And then there's another thing: if you have smaller competitors, people copying you or something, my simple rule is to never use the name of the company and just pretend they are not there, because my assumption is, why should I use my audience to give them attention? So
Okay,
I have
Theo.
my network, I have my audience, like they don't deserve it.
Did you hear what I said, by the
But
way?
hmm?
You know who always says that? Like, why should I use my audience to give you attention?
No.
Your buddy Theo. He's always saying that.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, my best friend Theo. I met him in person. He's
Yeah, it was a good
interesting.
day.
Okay, but and then there's this thing about these database companies, and I think one thing we need to be super careful about is benchmarks. So for many years now, I have benchmarks on my computer to compare all the different GraphQL gateways, like all of them, and I do little tweaks and tests, and I know a lot about how they behave, and I really love benchmarking on my own. But I have never committed this anywhere, and I'm not intending to publish it for a simple reason. Everybody who knows enough about benchmarking also knows that I can benchmark. I can define the results and benchmark backwards if I want to. Everybody
Yeah.
can do this. And I don't know, if you benchmark like a database, and one database has cold starts and one database doesn't have cold starts, yeah, well, what are you expecting? And then I don't know, why create this kind of drama? To be honest, like we are a super boring company. Just deploy a Postgres database, no serverless Postgres, just a boring Postgres on GCP, Azure, or AWS. It's always on. It costs a few bucks, but we have users. Who cares? There's no cold start, and I don't need to benchmark it, and I can trust it that it works. And yeah, okay, there's maybe other solutions, but maybe, for example, and this is not advertisement of sorts, but with Neon, you can have like serverless databases, and you can have branches and other things. And the benefit of a serverless database can be that you can have many of them, and they don't cost you something when they are asleep.
Yep.
And they might have a cold start or Prisma, or I don't know. I don't care about databases, but let's say you have a cold start. Use the right tool for the right job. Like, if you need 10,000 databases, but you rarely use them, maybe that's good. We need one Postgres, and it should be fast. And we want to have a boring, simple solution. We just use AWS or GCP. Like, but the one thing I would really avoid with these benchmarks is, actually, I tell a trade secret. No,
Do it.
yeah. The reason I'm not publishing benchmarks where other gateways look bad is I'm not giving away my knowledge. Like, if I show you where your gateway is really bad, it means that I'm pointing you exactly to where you have to improve. Like, I'm not going to do that. Like,
Yeah.
no,
I was
it's
wondering when you were
competition.
gonna say that.
So I don't want others, like, my product is better, but I don't have to tell you where. Like, you have to figure out on your own. And so I don't know, if someone publishes a benchmark that's like, please beat these results. Like, you urge the competition to act. Like, why do it? Keep it to yourself. I don't know. It's not smart.
I agree. For me, what I don't understand about benchmarks is like early in the journey is people would ask us for benchmarks against a competitor. And me and Jens hated that question because it's First of all, I honestly thought it was kind of lazy. Like, do the benchmarking yourself. Like, here's how you can do it: spin it up on yourself and run the benchmarking yourself. But also, we always said this: a customer never complained about performance. Like, it's very fast. It's trusted by some of the biggest enterprises in the world. But they're like, oh, but this one's just a little bit faster. And for me, I don't know. It kind of annoys me with benchmarks because it's exactly what you said. Every benchmark, the vendor can manipulate it to make themselves always look the best. It can introduce cold starts. It can use a outdated version of the gateway. I don't understand even why there's any relevance to benchmarks and why do developers like it so much. And the biggest thing for me about performance is you think of these things at scale, but the second you start thinking about it before you even have any users or any customers about it, I think that's wasted time. Like, why are you worrying about the performance when you should be worrying about the customer? What do you think?
Yeah, and that's another thing. So benchmarks are very what's the right word? Synthetic?
Synthetic.
Yes, synthetic. Because so we just recently built a new feature, cache warmer. It's so cool. So you run routers, they send telemetry data to our telemetry collector, and they tell us which queries is your router planning and how long does it take. So we put that into ClickHouse and we create a top N list of queries that take a long time to plan. And we every day we rebuild this list, put it on a CDN, and when the router starts or gets a new config, we have to invalidate all caches. We have a query planner cache, normalization cache, validation cache. So we invalidate all these caches. Then we take this list and we pre-warm based on this list, based on the traffic you had yesterday and the queries that were worst to plan. Based on that, we warm up the caches. And now when you get these requests that are really bad in planning time, they hit the cache. So that means we get the request, we parse it, and then we execute it. We don't plan. And plan, it can take milliseconds. It can take sometimes seconds in really bad cases. It takes CPU time. Like I/O is cool. I/O means router waits. Awesome. We can wait. We have Go routines. We can wait like thousands of requests. We can wait. But CPU, it's limited. We don't want to wait for a CPU because like we can only have so many CPUs. So with this approach, in a real world scenario, we were able to help a company go through Super Bowl without crazy flakiness on the router setup. However, if you run your synthetic benchmark, you will never see this kind of stuff because you're benchmarking like how much RPS can I hammer the router with one single query where the subgraphs are just returning static data. Like what actually are you testing? Like that's not real world. In real world scenarios, when we talk about benchmarking, what we actually need to do is, let's say you are Super Bowl and you get traffic, or you have Black Friday, you get a lot of traffic. So you have to ramp up your routers. You need to auto scale your routers, so more routers. If you deploy new routers and their caches are cold, it means you have spikes in latency, spikes in CPU time. So the reality is you need a solution that can cope with these kind of situations, like scaling up, scaling down, reloading the config. And then if you look at the benchmarks, is anybody reloading the config during the benchmark? Yeah, of course not, because I don't know what they are testing. And the thing is, if you ask a customer, like, hey, what are your needs? Like, listen to the customer. You know, it's always the same thing. Listen to your customer. Doesn't say, oh, we want to hammer the router with the same query. No, customer says, guys, we have a problem. When we scale up our routers, the caches are cold and we have latency spikes. Can you solve it? So this is like a real world problem versus just hammering a router with the same static query. Like it's, yes, you can benchmark it and the benchmarks can say something, but does it mean in the end that this router will work on Super Bowl? I don't know.
You hit so many good points there. So for one, the only people that do these benchmarks, the synthetic ones, are the ones that feel threatened or they want to kind of do a little performance thing. You know, like AWS doesn't run benchmarks. They don't have to. They're AWS. Who are they going to like run a benchmark for? And so for me, benchmarks are synthetic. But to wrap this point home, what I think is interesting is that if you collaborated with the companies on that use case for a Super Bowl, that's a good benchmark because it's an actual customer one, but you kind of can't because it's your customer. That's the only way that a benchmark would work because all these use cases are complex. And, you know, with the pre-running cache and the traffic spike, that's important. But what's synthetic about just hammering the router is that that's actually not a good benchmark because it's not even a real life use case. You're not just going to hammer it with a static query 150 times and then measure the difference between Cosmo and whatever the other routers are. And then for basically, benchmarks are just kind of BS. They kind of always are. If we could do them collaboratively, I think it'd be great. But I don't know if you can do them collaborative. Do you think we could?
You just did a rookie mistake, but you're not a senior developer. It's fine. Like benchmarks are useful. For example, I can run a local benchmark and I can enable pprof. So pprof allows me to analyze CPU usage and memory usage of the router. So I can enable pprof. I can run a benchmark, and then I can, for example, introspect what is the number of memory allocations, how many objects have been allocated, and where in the code have they been allocated. And so it can help me as a developer to optimize my tool and to also see, like, is there huge changes in behavior. But we have to be like super careful, and this is like one of the, I would say, big things I learned over the years of maturing as a developer. There's micro benchmarks and there's macro benchmarks. Micro benchmarks is you write like a Go test and you micro benchmark like a single function. And you then see the allocations line by line, and you see where you spend CPU time, and now you could go and optimize this function. And if you do this, what can happen, and it will happen if you're inexperienced, you will optimize like so many functions, and you will turn your code into an absolute mess. Because like micro optimizations, the problem is, let's say you have a function, and the function creates, it allocates memory, and that has to be garbage collected. So if you micro benchmark it, it looks bad. So you're like, okay, now I rewrite this function. I make the code, like typically code can be easy to read or fast. Like the faster you make the code, the worse it reads. And that's, you know, it's like, yeah, you want to be like super fast. Okay, assembler. You want to be like somewhat slower and readable. Okay, Go. And you want to be like faster, but use Go. Okay, ugly Go. And yeah, you can write super fast Go, and it's going to be more and more ugly, harder to maintain. And then you realize something. This function, in the broader scope, it almost gets never called. And so you micro optimize something, you made the code harder to maintain, but actually in the grand picture, like let's say you micro optimize this, and for each request, this function, it creates, let's say, 10 kilobytes of memory that need to be garbage collected. And you're like, that's bad. Let's make it 0. Like 0 garbage collection. Like we build something amazing. Okay, you optimize it. And then in the big picture, let's say one request, it takes about 100 megabytes of memory. So what is 10 kilobytes? Was it worth wasting your time in this function and complicating this code? And that's, so yeah, you need to be very careful with micro optimizing stuff. Sometimes it's better to do macro optimizing, but even with macro optimizing, like you're benchmarking the whole router and then you show like the top 10 memory problems. But even then you have this other problem of, if you run pprof, you would never see that when the customer scales up routers, the caches are cold. You don't see that. You need to think about the architecture. So if you want to make something fast, you can't just benchmark your way to, it's like A/B testing your way to product market fit. You can't benchmark your way to good performance. You really need to understand the architecture.
No, and I think it's a good like how the way you explained it. From my point though, it's not internal. Like we don't release our internal benchmarks, but we use them and we use competitors to make our product better. But I think marketing benchmarks, I just think it illustrates a position of weakness, and also you can always tweak them. And so that's my point on that. And then we are almost at time. So last topic I want to talk about, you brought this one up, so you're going to have to lead it on this one. But Reddit is always saying GraphQL is dead, GraphQL is dead. They're saying REST this, REST that. And honestly, REST versus GraphQL is a bit outdated, right?
Yep.
And what are your thoughts on that? Like, why is it outdated? Like, why is this argument? To be honest, it is outdated. Like, I see it all the time. If you want to get engagement on Twitter, just start talking about REST versus GraphQL. If you want to get some upvotes on Reddit, make a post about how it's outdated. But what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, first of all, I think the discussion is super boring, and it's led by people who, I'm not sure, they live in the past. So if you look at what's going on in the market, the discussion around REST versus GraphQL, what people are talking about is two styles of APIs of how a client can get data from a server. And then they argue things like overfetching, underfetching, whatever. And yeah, there are pros and cons, but ultimately what we see in the market today is, if you are a company that has grown to a certain size and they provide their service to other companies like B2B, sometimes B2C, but more B2B, you and others want to integrate with you, it is typically very intuitive to use REST APIs, because backend to backend, it's not beneficial to, in the backend, to query exactly the data you need, because just give me the data. I can then figure out what I need from that. Like that is one thing. So like B2B integrations, it's REST APIs. And then what we see is, if a company matures and they are on REST, they have all kinds of problems. And we see this with so many customers and prospects. You have a microservice architecture. All microservices, they expose a REST API, and then you have iOS app, Android app, web app, other apps, and you have point-to-point integrations. So iOS app talks to 20 microservices. Mm-hmm. That's a mess to integrate, and it's such a brittle thing. And then you have versioning, and it's so complex. If an app depends on like 20 microservice or something like that, what you can do is build a BFF architecture. So instead of one app talking to 20 microservices, it's one app talking to one BFF talking to 20 microservices. Still kind of same, very similar problem. And also what we like internally, we kind of name this manual federation. And you can, when you have an iOS app and it talks to 20 microservices over REST, then you're also using federation. Like everybody is federating. The thing is, you now federate in the client. Mm-hmm. If you have a BFF in the middle, you're federating on the server, so on the BFF. And so in the first case, one app, 20 microservices, it means that one front end, it depends on these 20 services. And how do you know that if you're changing one of the microservices, that this app depends on it and that it breaks? Like people have problems with contract testing and other things, and deployments go wrong, and everybody hates it. BFF, you move federation to the BFF. That means the app and the BFF, typically that's owned by one team. This contract is kind of stable, but you still have the same problem that when backends change, when microservices change, you have to catch up with the change in the BFF. So you're still manually federating, and you're like a new query, how we would say in federation. It's not a new query. A new query means you have to change an endpoint. It's so much manual work, and it's, in GraphQL federation, we can change a subgraph. We run check, and it tells us not breaking clients, because we can look at the traffic, we can analyze breaking changes and everything.
Nice.
So we're doing all of this. We have a super, like, I think one of the big points about federation is you know exactly what depends on what, and you don't have to manually build that BFF. So we save overhead. And ultimately, what we enable is collaboration across the teams. And so, what this comes down to, federation is not really solving a technical problem, because you can federate in the client, you can federate in the BFF, or you federate using GraphQL federation. What it solves is an organizational problem. And then there's this question coming all the way back to where we started, REST versus GraphQL. It's not about query style versus resource style or whatever. It's about solving an organizational problem. And that's why I'm like, please stop this discussion with REST versus GraphQL, because it's about something else, and it's just it's boring.
Do you think smaller organizations should use GraphQL?
It depends. So one of the great benefits of GraphQL is, if you're really doing it right, you can co-locate fragments with your user interface components, and you define the data dependency, like what from the graph do you need per component. Then you hoist up towards the root of the app, you hoist up all these fragments, build a single query. And now, before we load the page, we execute that query. We pass down the data to the UI component tree, and every fragment that we have created with data masking, it picks up the data it needs. And great approach. And there's tools like Relay that do this for a very long time. There's Isograph from Robert Belicki, and I think also Apollo Client supports fragments and this kind of workflow. And I also think from the guild, the GraphQL code generator, it also has some very advanced tooling to help with these kind of situations. So that's very powerful. The question to ask is, like, what's the structure of your organization? Do you really need this? If you are a super small startup, one single team, 5 devs, or if you are in a large organization, 5 devs, could you just get away with Next.js and TRPC or something like that? Because why introduce the complexity? Like, maybe this whole fragment workflow, it gives you something. If you benefit from this, if your UI is very complex, like things like Isograph, like really powerful features, do you benefit from this? It's okay, go for it. Like, we on our end, that's the funny thing. So Cosmo has a control plane, the backend.
I was gonna ask you this, by the way.
So we have a backend, it's the control plane. And we have a front end, it's like React, Next.js. And we're like, okay, and we have a CLI. So we were thinking, okay, CLI, front end, TypeScript, backend, Node.js. How will they speak to each other? And we thought, you know what? Buff connect /gRPC. We're just creating RPC endpoints with CodeGen. Like we define like a protobuf, we generate the code, and now you can make jokes about us. We're selling federation. We're not federating ourselves. We're not eating that portion of the dog food. But the reality is, why should we? Because we have one monorepo that contains the backend, the CLI, and the front end, owned by one team. No other teams, no microservice architecture, one single backend. What should we federate? And so we don't need federation for this architecture. Use the right tool for the right problem. And the second thing is, should we use GraphQL? And we're not people who go, we decide for GraphQL, let's find a problem that we can solve with it. We're more like, okay, we need to talk between a Node backend, a Node CLI, and a Node React frontend. What do? What's easy? What's boring? RPC? Okay, let's solve customer problems. And yeah, like don't get hung up on, build fancy tech with boring tech. Like Cosmo is cool, Cosmo is fancy,
Yeah.
but the way we've built it is boring. Postgres, Next.js, super boring. The absolute worst boring thing you could imagine is our auth. What's the auth thing again? Forgot it. Keycloak. Like this boring, ugly Java thing, but it works, and it has the device flow. So device flow is very important for the CLI, and you can run it locally. Like so many auth things, you cannot run them locally. We wanted to be able to run it locally with CI, and then Postgres, ClickHouse, boring stuff. So build cool tech with boring tech.
No, I like it. And then with that in mind, though, maybe we'll have to talk about this in the next episode, but big companies, big tech companies, huge ones, Netflix, Expedia, just big enterprises in general, especially if they're a little bit more modern, like last 20 years, I'll say. They like to build stuff internally themselves. They like to build these things. They like to complicate things. And I think it's because you attract talented developers that want to solve cool problems. Like, I don't want to throw Pinterest under the bus, but a guy that I know that works at Pinterest, he's like, I don't care about mood boards, but I care about the tech and the stuff that we're internally building at Pinterest. But he's like, I don't care about that. And you always say this, don't focus on the tech, focus on the business. But for developers, for example, like choosing boring tech, they like to work at companies with complex tech. They like to spin up their own bare metal servers. They like to solve these technical problems. What do you do at that point? Like, should they focus on boring tech, even though it's boring and providing value to the company, or should they focus on building stuff themselves because it's cool and it's interesting and they have the resources because they're a big company?
Good question. I mean, I'm the wrong person to ask what a big tech company should do. I lead a very small tech company. Yeah, I don't know. Like in the past, so I don't want to rant about anybody. I can speak from experience. In the past, I worked for a big German company, a news company, and we had bare metal servers.
Crazy.
And we had a data center, actually two. And because we had these data centers, we had people to maintain the data centers. So the logical thing you do is, if you have data centers, racks with big machines, and you have people, you install and run your own Kubernetes clusters. And I think that's a fabulous way of wasting all your time and doing stuff that doesn't bring the business forward. So, and I think as a developer, it's very dangerous to do things that do not directly affect the business. Like, we keep hearing about people getting cut, like the last 10% here, 20% there, like people are getting cut and lose their jobs. Do you lose your job if what you're building directly affects business? Or do you lose your job if you run Kubernetes clusters when we could also just go to the cloud and click on a button and have a Kubernetes cluster? I know it's not like you do
No,
more
that's
than just clicking the
spicy.
button, but
That's spicy. That's a good topic for next week. I like that one. So sadly, we are at time. But Jens, are you gonna say it? You're gonna
but
say it.
do you know what is the good thing?
What's the good thing?
We're back next week.
And we have a spicy topic: how to avoid a layoff. I'll work on the title,
Okay.
but I like it. Thanks, Jens.
Good.
Guys, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you guys next week. Cheers.